And I've known Mrs. Testerman since, I think, the mid-'90s when she lived in, Mount Vernon, New Hampshire. She was actively involved in exposing, what was it before Common Core?
Goals 2000.
Goals 2000, yeah, and that fraudulent scheme. And this class is running for office. And running for office, I think, is an important decision. And you should do it prayerfully, but some of you should be doing it when you're old enough to do it. And maybe some of you adults in town, too. There's an old saying that the nature abhors a vacuum. That's a scientific term, right, Professor Soon? But the devil loves a vacuum because his people will fill that vacuum as soon as they can. And they're very aggressive no matter where that is, whether it's inner city or it's rural areas. They will definitely come in and do that. You see, most of us, we like to hunt and fish and garden and all that. They move up here and they want to run for office. That's their, we go to church. Their church is town halls and city halls, and their church is government. Secular, their secular church. So I thought it's important that we have a class on this, and when Mrs. Testerman said, can I come to camp? I said, we'd love to. You're running for office. We can't endorse you as an organization, but you can talk to the campers about running for office because Mrs. Testerman is not only running for office, but she has served in office. And I tell you about a God thing. In New Hampshire, you don't have to get signatures to run for office. You just have to pay a fee. So to run for county commissioner, you got to go to the state house and fill out a form, and you give them $10. So and I think the deadline was June 10th or 11th. So I was there at the state house, Secretary of State's office, fill out one little page form, and I had to give him $10. I want my wallet. I knew I forgot something. I left the house without a check and only had $6 or $7 on me. So I says, well, I'll be right back. A little embarrassing, here I am, I want to be an accountable county commissioner. I don't have a lousy $10, So I walked out, I said, I know there's an ATM machine with probably 2 or 3 blocks away. I said, Lord, put somebody I know in front of me that will spot me the money. I crossed the street, and who do I run into? Mrs. Testerman. I says, hey, can you give me a few bucks so I can run for office? And by the way, I did pay her back. All right, so just give her a nice warm hand.
I want to introduce you to my little friend that I just got this little friend today. He came in the car with me, and he said he wanted to come along and find out, how do you run for office? So I said, well, come along and we'll find out. We'll go on this little ride together. So I'm going to put him up here so he can keep me company and you can know who he is. At any rate, okay. So running for public office, there's got to be certain steps that you go through, right? And let me give you a little backstory about where I am and how I got here. So when I came to New Hampshire, I didn't know anything about the state except that it had beautiful mountains, it had great streams, it had a close ocean. The big city of Boston was about an hour away. There were mountains I could go skiing on, and it was in New England. And we also checked the tax status, and it was the cheapest place to live as far as the tax burden was going on. So we decided we'd come to New Hampshire, and it took us a while. We were out in California at the time, and my husband had submitted all of his applications and so forth. He'd gone through friends, he went through the front door, he used all the different avenues to try and get his name in front of the right person to hire him. And this was right about Thanksgiving time. And our second son was at the Naval Academy, and this was his year of graduation. And on top of that, this is the last Army-Navy game I could be going to as a parent. So I was bound and determined we were going to get to the East Coast to be able to do that. So we packed up our bags and we started east and got stopped a couple of places along the line. But eventually, my husband got his notification that he got the job. Unfortunately, we were unpacking our bags and our household goods into a 6-month lease that we had signed in Georgia. And so anyway, everything worked out, and we eventually got to New Hampshire. Well, when I got to New Hampshire, I didn't know anything about the political climate here. In fact, I wasn't even interested in it. I was still raising a child at home, and some flags started going off about the school system that we were getting ready to build in our new community. And so the more I checked into it, the more I said, hey, there's got to be a family policy council associated with Focus on the Family, because Dr. Dobson talks about these state organizations all the time, and they will keep an eye on the legislature and tell you how it's going to impact your family. So where is it? And I'm digging and digging and digging, and I can't find it anywhere. So finally I get on the phone and I call Focus on the Family, and I said, where is this Family Policy Council in New Hampshire? You know what their answer was? That's right. So what does this curious person do? How did they get started? Well, people like you call. So 6 years later, I was on the campaign trail, and this is really crazy too, because I was on the campaign trail with Gary Bauer in 2000, having no total idea of what I was doing except that I was running his statewide organization for some reason. I should back up too to say in 1996, this was a real weird one. I was just getting exposed to the political world, and Pat Buchanan was running for president, and he was my favorite. So I would go down to his headquarters periodically and visit my friend who was the receptionist, say hi, bye, and sometimes take her out to lunch, but that was it. All of a sudden, 1996, I get to go to the National Republican Convention as an alternate for Pat Buchanan. You asked me how that happened, I still don't know for sure. I've got my suspicions at this point, but I do not know absolutely how I got there, except for God. Yeah. So now going on to the other part, there were a bunch of us looking at, or I was at this event. It was a campaign event for Gary Bauer, and this gentleman walks up to me and says, I think I can get you seed money to get your Family Policy Council going. So that's how Cornerstone Policy Research was birthed. And I wanted to call it the Family Institute for New Hampshire. And this guy kept coming back to me and saying, we can't get that name. The Secretary of State won't let us register that name. It's too close to other things. So he says, I want you to put Cornerstone out there. And I said, okay. Cornerstone Policy Research would be an acronym for CPR for New Hampshire if we ever needed to use it. So that's how we came up with the name. But further on, I'm starting to realize that you can go to an event that you don't even pay for. You may be a guest of somebody. It's a fundraiser, and you're sitting at the table, and all of a sudden up on the stage is 2 senators and a congressman. You can't do that in any other state in the Union. Only in New Hampshire can you go to an event where there are about 200 people, and you don't pay for it, and you get to talk to these people for 5 or 10 minutes. Amazing, right? So as I was running Cornerstone, I was starting to investigate various other things that I was noticing about the state of New Hampshire. And I had been asked at one point to run for state representative, and I said, oh, okay, I can do that, not knowing what I was doing either, and not necessarily preparing, but I did know there was a difference in our structure because we have an executive council here. And so the first thing I want to talk to you about is the fact that you've got to have a reason for, let's see, where's this little thingy going? Where are you? Oh, there we are. You have to know what your motivation is. Why am I going to put my name out there? In this particular case, somebody asked me, and I thought about it, and I said, well, what are the requirements? You had to be a resident for 2 years, or have lived in the state for 2 years. And I'll get beyond that a little bit, but you had to be here, and then you had to pay taxes. You had to be registered here. okay, I can do that, I qualify, so therefore I ran. I figured it was a matter of going out and putting out signs. I didn't know necessarily what a state representative did, but I was willing to go. Well, I ran 2 different times. Each time the party didn't want some conservative like me. I guess I got a reputation right away. I don't know how, but obviously I did. And so they always ran somebody against me and left an open seat next door to me, so I could never figure that one out. Well, fast forward, I'm learning more and more as the executive director of Cornerstone. I'm going up to the State House and I'm finding out these various procedures that go on within the government, and I'm gradually getting exposed to this. You know, God does some really amazing things, and He exposes you to certain things because He knows you're going to pick up some talents along the line. And you never know where that's going to lead you, but I kept meeting these people in Colorado, in Washington, D.C., down in Louisiana, and various things whenever I would be going out on an event that had to do with Cornerstone and promoting it and learning more about it. And so as I was doing that, I was meeting these people and I'm thinking, why do I get to meet these important people along the way, like Alex Newman and Governor Huckabee. In fact, Governor Huckabee, I attended an event for him up in this area at a church, and then I saw him down in Washington, D.C., and then I saw him in Colorado, and I was always in a position where I was right next to where he was, so knowing that he meets a lot of people, I would always introduce myself as Karen Testerman from New Hampshire. And finally, about the 4th time, he said, "I know who you are." And I said, "Well, I'm just tracking you, and I'm following you everywhere." But that wasn't true. It just was coincidence along the line. But little did I know why God was preparing me in this way to go out and find out what we were doing. So one of the things you have to decide when you're going to make your decision about whether or not you want to run for office is you've got to look at what offices are available. So at the state level, you have the governor, the executive council, the state senate, and the House of Representatives. Well, why is New Hampshire unique in this area? We don't have a lieutenant governor. We have 5 executive counselors. The executive counselors were a carryover from the Crown, from the British way of doing things. These were 5 governors that were supposed to be keeping an eye on the people in America for the king. But somehow we decided to keep that part of the oversight. And these people are elected by the people, and they're supposed to be the last opportunity for the people's voice to be heard before the governor decides to sign or veto something. We have 24 state senators, but does anybody know how many state representatives we have? 400, that's right. Why do we have 400? Because our founders of this state wanted every community to have a representative in the state house. And it went from being represented by the town that as we grew as a state, they decided to assign a certain amount of people to it. Well, when we got to a representative for every so many people, and we had 400 people coming into the State House, they said, hey, time to cut it off because we don't have any more places to seat them. So they decided that they would cap the number of state representatives and divide the population accordingly. So in New Hampshire, we have about 1 state representative for every 3,800 people. That's not true in any other state in the Union. You cannot get that close to your elected representatives. You try it down in Massachusetts, you try it in Vermont, it doesn't work, even in Maine. So this is another unique situation for New Hampshire, and we've been meeting in the State House in Concord for the longest of any legislative body in the United States. So, I'm going to figure this out. There we go. You can also run for county offices, and that's the sheriff, county attorney, the county treasurer, the register of deeds, the register of probate, and then there's some other ones that are out there. There's a county commissioner, there's some other offices that you could be running for. If you get down to the town level, you can run for moderator, keeper of the checklist. In most communities, they have 3 or more people who serve as keepers of the checklist. You can run for school board. You can run for the library board, or the zoning board, or the cemetery board, or the budget committee, or any of a number of other offices. So you can be very, very involved. So stop and think about it. Every 2 years in the state of New Hampshire, we elect 430 people at the state level, at the state legislative level up into the congressional delegation. 430. But that's not counting the county offices and the town offices. So you see why we are involved in our elections here so frequently, why candidacy and elections are so very, very important, is because we have so many people that do it. Why is that? What did our founders really have in their minds when they had us do this exercise? They wanted every person to be able to serve their community if called upon. So notice I said if called upon. So how many of you know how many constitutions you have? Yep. You have the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Don't forget the Declaration of Independence. It's very, very important. And you have your own state constitution. Every state's constitution is slightly different. New Hampshire has a unique one, and it's probably one of the best in the United States because there are 32 Bill of Rights. There's 2 parts to our Constitution. One talks about the people's rights, and the other talks about the form of government. So now, if you don't know what's in your Bill of Rights, if you don't know that you have a right to privacy, if you don't know that you are supposed to defend and enjoy life, if you don't know that every inhabitant has a right to vote, then you can't fight for that if somebody steps on it and tries to take it away from you, right? So in the beginning of New Hampshire, in order to serve in office, you had to be an inhabitant. You had to make this your home. In some cases, you had to live here. I believe it was about 10 years. But the other thing that was very unique is that you had to be a Christian Protestant. Christian Protestant. And you had to be willing to serve when called upon. If you did not want to serve when called upon, they could fine you. So this is why it's really important that we have this. They wanted the citizenry to be involved, very, very involved in everything that was going on. So you have to decide what office you're going to run for and why are you running. So when I decided to run for governor, I actually didn't decide to run for governor. I was actually temporarily out in Seattle, Washington, asleep in Seattle, believe it or not. And I woke up and it said, run for governor. I'm going, what? You gotta be kidding me. I'm not, there's no way I'm doing that. Next night, run for governor. I'm going, really? So it took me about a week, and I finally said to my husband, I think I'm supposed to go back and run for governor. And what did he say? Okay, go ahead. So I was making these trips back and forth, and one of the first things I did was set up my intercessor team and said, you know, I need to have prayer covering for this whole thing. I was interviewing with the chairman of the Republican Party, with different what do they call them? They're counselors of some sort, and asking them what they thought about it. And they were all saying, you don't have enough money, you can't run it, and you can't raise that much money, so you're not going to make it. Okay, but my Father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. If He wants me to do this, He's going to give me the people I need to go for. So what did He do? This is back in 2010. He gave me a complete volunteer staff. I had one family that did the data entry, they did the scheduling, and they did the overall mapping of everything that needed to be done. And when I got done, I took 10% of the vote and had no debt. So I looked back and I tried to figure out, why was I supposed to run for governor? Because I wasn't feeling the need to run the next cycle 2 years later. I wasn't thinking that I needed to do anything, but as I looked back on it, it was because I was intent on saving our families and making sure that families were the building block of America. Pardon?
You answered your presentation.
I lost my presentation. Thank you. I don't know where it went, but we'll see. Here. Okay. Experts. We need experts. So while he's doing that, one of the things that you have to do when you're preparing to run for office, what's one thing that you think would be a very, very important thing to do? Anybody? What would you read? What would be one of the first things that you would read? I'm sorry?
I would read the Bible.
The Bible? That's a good place to... You ought to be reading that every day anyway. Yeah. What's another thing you would be reading?
State constitution.
Your state constitution. Very, very important. So I know one young man who actually did this. He was sitting down in his father's basement. And I'm going to have to get going because I'm running out of time. But he was sitting down in his father's basement and playing video games. And then he came across a book, and it was about the Founding Fathers. And he got so very, very interested. He read through the state constitution, the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, Blackwell's Dictionary of, and Bastion's The Law. And he read through a lot of these different founding documents that had something to do with why we ended where we were. I don't know if he read the Magna Carta or not, but there you go. Anyway, I don't know if he read the, does that come back up? No, what did I do? Oh, here it is. I gotta go down here to that thing right there? Okay. It's not liking me. Anyway. So he read through all of these documents, and then it took him about 2 years, and then he ran for state representative. He was the one most qualified person that I knew who had ever run for office, because he really went and researched and figured out what it was he was supposed to be doing. And that was an excellent preparation. Not everybody's going to do that, but you do need to know your Constitution so that you can represent your people fairly. And one of the very most important things you need to be asking, if you're going to propose any legislation at all, or if you're going to make a change at the town or anything else, is, does the Constitution of New Hampshire or the Constitution of Maine or the Constitution of Massachusetts allow me to do this? Am I going to be stepping on the people's rights if I do this? Because if we look at what's going on in government today, our government is not protecting our rights. Our government is dictating our rights. It very clearly says in the U.S. Constitution that those items that are not assigned to the federal government are left to the states and the people. And the same thing's true about the state constitutions. It tells you what you can and cannot do as a government body. The government body is simply supposed to be organizing things so that you can live as freely as possible, right? And why is God so important? We are the only nation in the world that founded our government on God, on those God-given principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and other things, right? So that's why it's so important. And I don't know if you noticed, but somebody sent me a picture today, and this is a little aside, of our quarters. Our old quarters used to have George Washington's picture on it, right? It has his profile. Which direction is that profile facing? In the old quarters, it's facing "In God We Trust." New quarters are, this guy is him. Anyway, in the new quarters, we're facing away from "In God We Trust." We're turning our back on God. No wonder we're in the trouble we're in. So that's another reason to be motivated to serve your community, is to keep God in the proper place, to continue to honor Him, to recognize Him. Do you know that a person in the early part of our nation used to hear something like 70,000 hours of sermons by the time they were 70 years old? So we're not anywhere close to that today. So anyway, first thing you need to do once you're preparing and you've read your Constitution is you need to have a written campaign plan. And I say written because if it's not down on paper, it's in all likelihood you haven't thought it through and you probably won't follow it at all. Next thing is, I'm going to go there, yeah. You need to also, as you're thinking about that, do I need a website? Do I need to do social media? How do I get in front of the media so that I can get some publicity? Because we all know that elections are based on name recognition. And in New Hampshire, because we are so close with our elected officials, they want to be able to look you in the eye and shake your hand. So that means you got to get on the trail, put on your tennis shoes, and start walking. And do door knocking, go to events, kiss the babies, all of that kind of thing. And then you have to have materials that are going to help you get out there. So one of the things you probably are going to do is get something like a handout. These are this is a pamphlet. Many people will have just a card that they can hand to someone when they go door to door or when they're meeting them and say, here. The other thing you might have is other paraphernalia like these hands. There are some out there on the table. You're more than welcome to take them. But little giveaways, because when you give something to someone, they remember you. And that's what you want them to do. Another thing is that you also want those people who are going to be driving around to drive around with your bumper sticker. So that's another thing. And I also had shirts printed. So you could, when somebody's wearing your shirt, they're advertising for you. These are all marketing tools. You might even do something like that's very famous with our former president, is hats, right? So when you do that, you might have your own name on there. My name is so long that it doesn't work real well, so I put "Make New Hampshire Great Again," or "Free Again." Those are sort of the paraphernalia that you want. And then you've got to have a plan on how am I going to meet all these people, where am I going to go? So it helps to have a scheduler. A scheduler is very, very important. And then you need to start building your volunteer team, people that will go with you to the parades, that will go with you to the various events and help collect names for you. And you're going to build a database. And that can be a real headache, but it's something that you can do. And so then you want to make sure you take plenty of pictures, because those pictures are going to go up on websites, they're going to go in your campaign literature, they're going to go wherever you can get them so that people know that they're involved. And not only that, when you take their picture, They're excited about it, and it makes them feel important, and you want your volunteers to know that they are vital to you, because you're not going to do this alone. The next thing is the execution of your plan, and so here's something that you might have as a poster. I have a very generous young man who has called me up one day and he said, "You don't have very good graphics. I want to help you out." So he put this together. This is awesome, right? I have another friend who said he wanted to do radio ads for me. So he did the radio ads for me. One of the most important things you have to do, however, when you do radio ads, is you have to have a disclaimer like this. Let's see if it plays. Nope, it doesn't. But a disclaimer that says, I'm Karen Testerman and I approve this message. You've heard that kind of thing at the end. That's required if you're going to put anything on radio or TV, and it also helps in your little ads. This one I'm going to play for you because this is a video that somebody put together for me to highlight my platform and what it was I'm doing. This is to let people know where do you stand on these various issues, and if you've got catchy pictures, and this also has sound that goes with it, it's got some music that goes behind it, and then this disclaimer that says, I'm Karen Testerman, vote for me, text Liberty to 801-801, which is a way to get donations, and I'm Karen Testerman and I approve this message. Oops. And then you have the election. What do we do on the election? We need to have campaign workers. We need to have someone who's going to go into the various polling places at the end of the evening to give you the numbers. What were the final numbers and the tallies? And so they can turn around and call you and tell you what they are so that your people can now start putting it up on the board that night at your gathering, and they'll be able to then get a sense about how well you did, and so forth. But you also want to have these gatherings periodically so that your people know that they're appreciated, that you're having fun. You're supposed to be having fun when you're going through all of this, and it is one of the most rewarding things that I've found in running for office is that I get to find out what companies exist in the state now, but it used to be in the location. So when I was the city councilor of Franklin, I got to find out about all the manufacturing that actually happened in my little city that I didn't know about, even though I'd lived there for 15 years. So these are important things that you get to know the neighbors, you get to know the other elected officials, and once you're sitting in a position like a city councilor, you get to know what it is that makes the city hum, and what problems do they have? Where do they have where do they need improvement? What can we do? How do we finance it? And so forth like that. And one of the things I encourage you to do is get a ride along with your police department, get a ride along with your fire department. If you can go in and maybe even trail the city councilor or the mayor or a selectman, if you can go out and say, hey, I'd like to follow you for a day when you're doing business, would you mind if I follow you? That's something you can all do. And it doesn't just apply to your elections, it also applies to any vocation that you might be interested in doing. If you're going to pursue a teaching position, for example, you might want to ask a teacher that you know, can I watch what you do and how you do it? This is a very, very good hands-on experience. So anyway, you go to the election, and depending upon what size the election it is, if it's a town election, you're just going to show up at the polling place, and you're going to make sure that you greet people as they're coming in, that your face and your sign is being there. Your signs are very important. The design of your sign, you want to make sure that it can be seen from far away. My husband designed this bumper sticker because he didn't like the white background on the other ones. So, and because it makes it easier for somebody to see, and those are things that you have to take into consideration when you're building these things. And then the other thing on election day is you want to make sure that you go vote. Don't get so wrapped up in things that you haven't gone out to vote. And you're encouraging others. Sometimes you might want to make sure that you have people going around and collecting other people who might not be able to drive to the polls that day because they either don't have a car or they don't drive. You can actually make arrangements to go pick somebody up. And that's something that your organization would be preparing. And then you want also some people that are going to be in the polls watching to make sure that the process is going the way it's supposed to be going, and that there aren't a whole bunch of extra ballots showing up and being put into the machines that shouldn't be there. And by the way, the machines in New Hampshire are illegal, but we can't get some people to recognize that yet. So those are the things you want to make sure that everything is fair and honest, and then you want your people to be able to enjoy themselves. They're going to have a party. Then afterwards, you're going to want to make sure that you go back and do an oversight. Talk to your team. What did we do that was good? What did we do that was not so good? Where can we improve? What should we have done that we left undone? Those are things that you can use the next time you get involved in an election of any sort. And that's it. So